A girl at the bank stopped me by the paying-in slips and asked if Friday was still all right for the second one. She never knew what she'd handed me. She was 22 and helpful, and she had that bright, careful voice they train into them. I said Friday was fine. I said it in about a second and a half, because 31 years across a desk from frightened people teaches you to keep your face still while the rest of you catches up. Then I went out and sat in the truck with the engine off and the heat coming up off the asphalt, and I worked out three things in order. If there was a second one, there had been a first. I'd never signed anything in my life to allow either, and I had just told a bank to go ahead with it. If you're still with me, subscribe to True Deceit Stories and put in the comments where you're listening from tonight. I'd like to know. Now I have to tell you about Milo, because the money was his. Milo Chalupa and I met in the 4th grade in 1966, in a schoolyard in Vilsek Prairie, back when it was still prairie and not 1,100 houses with the same 3 front doors. He was Czech and I'm German, and out here that mattered to our grandmothers and never once to us. He played the accordion. Red 3-row Hohner, bought in Seguin in 1971 with money from baling hay. He played every lodge dance in this county for 40 years. He wasn't good. Nobody cared, because he was loud and he knew 400 tunes, and he'd play till the floor cleared. He died in 2023 at 68. We hadn't spoken in 9 years, and that was my doing, and I'd do it again tomorrow. Here's what happened. In 2014, his daughter Renata started moving money out of his accounts. 400 here, 1,100 there. All of it explainable, all of it explained. I saw it in 4 minutes. That's not a boast. Show me 18 months of a man's statements, and I'll tell you which of his children is going to ruin him. I'll be right. It's the most useless skill a person can own. I drove over and told him at this table. He put his hat on. He said, "Stay out of my family." He went home. We lived 11 miles apart for 9 years and never spoke again. 2 funerals. I nodded. He nodded. Then in 2023, a lawyer I'd never heard of rang me about a will. Milo changed everything in 2019. Cut Renata out entirely. Left me $240,000 and the accordion. So he believed me. Somewhere in those 9 years, he sat down in an office that wasn't mine and did the exact thing I'd told him to do, and he never picked up the phone. I've had 2 years with that, and I'm no further along than I was in the lawyer's office. The money sat where it landed. I'd get as far as thinking about it and stop, because there's no way to spend a man's money that mesn't and isn't an opinion about the man. Dale and Bree moved in the following March. Dale's my son, 41. Bree's 39. Wyatt was 7 then, and he's 8 now. The reason was medical, and it was real. Bree had a surgery, then a complication from the surgery, then 11 months of bills coming in faster than they could open them. They lost the rental in Converse. I've got 4 bedrooms and a wife who's been dead in this house 14 years. I liked her. I want that on the record because of what comes after. For about 10 months I liked her. Then in June my grandson came off his bike. It was the bad kind, where the shape of the arm is wrong. Bree was at work, and Dale was on a job in Beauern, so I put Wyatt in the truck and drove him to the Children's Hospital in San Antonio. We were there from 10 in the morning till nearly 7 at night. They set it, and they cast it. He held my hand through the setting, and he did not cry. And I've never been prouder of another human being. They scan your card at the desk when you come in. They write the time down. Hold on to that. Because on that same Tuesday, in my kitchen, at my table, my daughter-in-law and a notary named Randy Pilcher sat down and made a paper that said I was standing there. Not that I'd agreed to something, that I was in the room, that I stood in front of a commissioned officer of the state of Texas and picked up a pen and signed my own name. That paper doesn't give anybody your money, it gives them you. I wrote several thousand of them. Legal aid first, out of a room with 2 desks. Then 31 years over the feed store on Casper Street. Widows. Farmers. A man with a tumor who wanted his brother able to sell the cattle. And every time I said the same sentence, so often it's sounding like anything, I said, "This is the most dangerous piece of paper you will ever sign, and it's only ever as good as the person you hand it to." $91,000 went out of that account in 2 transfers. The first went 11 days before the girl in the lobby stopped me. The second was the Friday I'd just said was fine. Now, this next part is the thing people find hardest, and it's the thing I'd do again. I didn't say Friday was fine by accident. I said it because I'd had a second and a half, and in a second and a half, a man who's done this work for 31 years gets exactly one useful thought. Mine was this. 1 transfer is an argument about a signature. 2 is a pattern. 1, and it's my word against a notary stamp, and the stamp wins. 2, with a clerk in a lobby who will remember asking me, and a date, and a second stamp on a second page, and it stops being an argument. It's a case. So I let $91,000 of my dead friend's money walk out of my account on a Friday afternoon on purpose to buy the thing that would get it back. Was that clever, or was it a man who couldn't stand to be wrong twice? Ask me at 4 in the morning, and it's the second one. I drove home and said nothing. Next morning I called the bank and asked for everything they held with my name on it. It's free. It takes about a week, and it works because a bank cannot move money on a document it can't produce. It came in a brown envelope on the Thursday, 4 pages. My name across the bottom of the second one, in handwriting that wasn't bad. Somebody had practiced the F, and the F is the hard part. Underneath it, in the box where the notary swears what he saw, the stamp and signature of Randall K. Pilcher, commission expiring 2027, dated Tuesday, the 11th of June. The hospital scanned my card at 9:51 that morning, 200 miles away. And in the third box, on the line where a witness puts his name to say he stood there and watched me sign it, in handwriting I've known since that hand was a child's. Dale Ottmer's. I sat in the truck with those pages a long while. For 11 days I'd been telling myself a story. It was that Bree did this, and my son found out after, and hadn't the spine to undo it. That's what I'd built in the parking lot and the front room, and at 2 in the morning. It took 4 seconds to lose. Because the witness line isn't a signature you can forge in a hurry. It's a claim about where a man's body was. He was in the room. 2 nights later, I heard her through the kitchen window. I was out on the back step. Gone 10, still 94 degrees, and the window over the sink propped open the way she leaves it when she's cooked. She was on the phone, and I got her half of it. She said the second one had cleared, and there was nothing to do now but sit still. Then she said, "No, he won't. He signs whatever you put in front of him. He always has. And it's about the only thing he's ever been reliably good at." Then she laughed. She wasn't frightened and she wasn't cornered. She sounded like a woman describing a slow uncle at a family reunion. 31 years. I've sat with women who couldn't read the paper in front of them and gone through it line by line until they could. I've refused to stamp for men. I've known my whole life because something in the room was wrong. And I'm the one who signs whatever you put in front of him. I sat out there till her light went off. There's a crack in the second slab where the concrete lifted in the drought of 11, and I put my thumb in it the way I've done 10,000 times. 31 years didn't teach me to read people. I liked her for 10 months. What it taught me was narrower and worth more. Every one of these needs a licensed stranger to put a stamp on something, and that stranger keeps a book. A woman came into my office in about 88, shaking, because her brother had told her she'd already signed the farm over. I took my own book down off the shelf, put it on the desk in front of her, and turned it round. I said, Find the day. She found it. There was her name in her own hand, next to a thing that was not the farm. She cried for a while, then went home and told her brother what was sitting in a book in my office, and I never heard from either of them again. That book was never mine. I handed it in the week I closed, the way you have to, and a page can be cut out of one. That's worse for him than the forgery ever was, because the forgery is somebody else's crime and the cutting is his. So you don't go at the family. You go at the stranger with the stamp, and you ask the one question the book has to answer. Who stood in front of you, and on what day? I drove into town on the Monday to see Ophelia Sandoval. Ophelia runs legal aid now, out of the same 2 rooms I started in. I trained her in '98 when she was 24 and wouldn't stop arguing with me, and she's better at this than I ever was. I put the 4 pages on her desk. She didn't pick them up. She read the top one where it lay, a hand flat either side of it, then turned it round to face me and put one finger on the notary's line. She said, "Tell me what that is." I said, "Ophelia, I taught you that." She said, "I taught you plenty. Tell me anyway." So I said it out loud in the room I used to work in. "That's a man swearing under his commission that he watched me pick up a pen," she said. "And where were you?" I said, "San Antonio, 9:51. She sat back and let me get there on my own, which is a thing I taught her and had never once had done to me. Then she gave me the 2 things I'd driven in for, and neither cost $1. She said, "I can make him hand me that book today, if you want." "It was never his," I said. "And the money." She put her pen down. She said, "Frank, listen to me, because you've said this to other people, and you've stopped hearing it. That paper never gave her a cent. It let her act as you. Every dollar she moved is traceable, and every dollar is coming back, because at no second of any of this did that money stop being yours." I sat in her office and had my own sentence read back to me by a woman I taught it to, and it was the first full breath I'd taken since the parking lot. "How long?" She said, "Months." Then she said the part I hadn't let myself get to, "And the whole time they live in your house. 4 months. Let me give you them properly, because people imagine this part as tense, and it isn't. It's domestic. That's what makes it unbearable. I ate dinner with that woman about 90 times. I drove Wyatt to school Tuesdays and Thursdays. I helped Dale rehang the gate on the north fence in 104 degrees, one of us holding it while the other set the post. Bree made a peach thing in July. I had 2 helpings and told her it was the best thing I'd eaten in 10 years, and it was, and I've never worked out which of us was lying harder at that table. You stop sleeping around the 2nd week, not from fear, from arithmetic. You lie there working out what happens to an 8-year-old on a Tuesday morning in October, and you get the same answer every time, and you go round again anyway. I lost 11 pounds between June and October, and my doctor was pleased with me. The worst hour of the week was Sunday lunch, because that's when it was most like a family. 4 of us at that table with the fan going. Wyatt telling me about a lizard. Dale carving, because his mother always made me do it, and he took it over the year she died. In August, she started putting things in boxes. Not my things. Hers and Dale's and a good deal of Wyatt's, and she did it in the evenings with the television on. When I asked, she said she was getting ahead of the school year. I counted 11 boxes by the end of the month, stacked in the room my wife died in. In September, she asked me at that table about Milo's money. "Have you thought any more about what you're doing with it?" I said I hadn't decided. She said, "Well, there's no rush." Then she passed me the potatoes, and Wyatt asked if he could be excused, and Dale said not till everybody's finished, and it was a Sunday like any other Sunday. Ophelia filed for the book in August. His office rang her back the same afternoon and asked what exactly she wanted. Which is not a question an innocent office asks. Then nothing for 3 weeks. Then a courier pulled up outside legal aid on the 12th of September with a bound book in a padded envelope. Ophelia phoned me before she opened it and I drove in. The entries run clean through the spring, April, May, the first week of June. Then the 11th of June isn't there, and it isn't there in a particular way. The page is gone, cut close to the gutter with something sharp, and the numbering jumps from 41 to 43. You can't lose a page out of a bound book. He took a blade to it. That's the moment the whole thing turned, and it had nothing to do with my family. A forged signature is Bree's crime. That book is his. The cutting is his, and there's no innocent version of a cut page. I've thought about it as hard as a man can think about anything, and there isn't one. I drove out to Shirts to look at him in September. Ophelia told me not to, and she was right, and I went, and I'd go again. He works in a title office in a strip on the access road, between a nail place and a phone store. He's 34. He came out to the counter and knew who I was before I gave my name, and that told me plenty. He took me back to a desk and offered me a coffee. He started by saying there'd been a mix-up with the file, that his office does 100 of these a month, that he was sure it could be straightened out without anybody making more of it than it was. I let him run all the way out. Took about 2 minutes. Then I said, "What's the number of the entry?" He said, "The what?" I said, "The 11th of June. In your book. What number is it?" He didn't say anything. I said, "I'll tell you why I'm asking. The two either side of it are 41 and 43. I've seen them. So has a judge." He said his book had been damaged. I said, "By what?" And he had nothing. He sat in a swivel chair in a strip mall on an access road and looked at the desk while a man of 69 watched him work out that there's no sentence that finishes that question. So I gave him the only thing I'd driven out there to give him. It had nothing to do with prison. Nobody his age is frightened of prison. They're frightened of the next 40 years of applications. I said, "You'll lose the commission, and that happens whatever else happens. And it isn't the part that matters. The part that matters is that there'll be an order with your name and your number on it. It's public. It stays public. Every title company in this state runs that check before it hires anybody, and you're 34 years old." He asked if there was anything he could do. I said, "On the 11th of June there was." Then I got up and left him sitting in it. October is when it came apart, and it came apart fast. They interviewed Dale on a Wednesday. Nobody warned him, and nobody was supposed to. He came home about 4. I was at the table with the crossword. He stood in the doorway with his keys still in his hand. He said, "Dad, they showed me the paper." I said, "I know. I've seen it." He said, "My name's on it." I said, "I know that too. I've known since June." And that's when my son sat down on the floor of my kitchen, not in a chair. On the floor, back against the dishwasher, 41 years old, both hands flat on the tile. He told me the whole of it, and nobody asked him to. That matters, legally, and I didn't tell him so at the time, because I wanted it to be the other thing. It was hers from the start. She found Pilcher through a woman at her work. She'd had the form filled in 3 weeks before she used it, and on the Tuesday she told Dale to sit at the table, because a notary needs a witness and it looks strange if the witness is a stranger. He said he asked where I was. She said San Antonio, back late. He signed it anyway. I asked him the only thing I wanted an answer to. "Why?" He said, "Because she told me that if I didn't, that was me choosing you over her and Wyatt." He said, "What was I supposed to do with that?" I didn't answer him. There's an answer, and he was 41 years old, and it wasn't my job to hand it to him at that hour. 14 weeks, and he still hadn't worked it out. He'd just stopped being able to sleep. They came for her on a Tuesday morning in October at about 7:30. It's quiet. That's the thing nobody tells you. 2 at the door, very ordinary, and one of them wiped his feet. Wyatt was at the table with his cereal. Dale had him up out of that chair and down the hall, before the second one was through the door. talking the whole way about something else. And I heard a cartoon start in the back bedroom. She looked down at what she had on her feet, which were the canvas things she wears round the house, and asked whether she could put proper ones on, and one of them went up the stairs behind her while she did it. And at the door, with her good shoes in her hand, she turned round and looked at me and said, "You let it go on for 4 months." She meant it as an accusation. She wanted me to hear that I'd sat at her table and eaten her food and let it run. So I gave her the number. I said, "It wasn't 4 months. It was 11 days." She said, "What?" I said, "The second transfer. The Friday one." A girl at the bank asked me if Friday was still all right, and I told her it was. Then I watched her do the arithmetic. She didn't cry, and she didn't shout. She didn't say a word for about 4 seconds, and I watched every one of them go across her face. Every Sunday lunch since June, the peach thing in July, the gate on the north fence, 11 boxes in the room my wife died in, 4 months of a woman being careful around a man she'd decided couldn't read a document, and the whole time he'd already sent the paper to a lawyer and put the book in front of a judge. She never had the advantage. Not one day of it. She only ever had the feeling of it, and that is what I took off her at that door. Then she said, "Dale." And my son did not come out of the back bedroom. She said it again, from the step, louder. "Dale?" One of them put a hand on the car door and waited. She stopped. She got in. Then the car went up the road past the Kastner's place, and that was that. Now the part you stayed half an hour for. Every dollar came back, all 91,000 of it, by February. It came back because of the thing I told you at the start, and it's why I said Friday was fine in a bank lobby, with a second and a half to decide. That paper never gave her a cent. It only let her hold the pen. The money was mine at every second in law, the whole way through, and the day the paper was void. The bank had no ground left and knew it before we did. Bree pleaded in the spring. She didn't go to prison. She got 3 things: probation, restitution, and a felony conviction that goes on every form she fills in from now until she dies. Housing, work, anything to do with money, anything to do with anybody's grandmother. There are a great many forms, and she has 40 years of them. The letter about Pilcher came in January, in a plain envelope, and I opened it standing up at the counter the way I open everything now. He lost the commission. He won't get another one, and that isn't a guess. The order is public. It names him. It says what he did, and it doesn't come off. He put a blade to a book that belonged to the state of Texas for a woman he'd met twice, and I'd put the fee at $300. Dale wasn't charged. He gave his statement before anybody offered him a thing for it, and the woman from the district attorney's office told me that in a way I don't believe she strictly had to. He testified in the spring. His wife sat at the other table and he did it anyway, and he never once looked over. And I know because I watched him not do it for 2 hours. He came out into the corridor afterwards and stood by the window a long time, and then he asked me whether I thought Wyatt would remember any of it. I told him the truth. I said, "Some. Not the part you're worried about." She came back to the house once, in May, for the last of Wyatt's things. Dale took the boy to his sister's for the afternoon, so it wouldn't have to happen in front of him. So it was the 2 of us in my kitchen for about 20 minutes, and nobody was recording anything, and there was nothing left for either of us to find out. She filled 2 bags off the shelf in the back bedroom and set them by the door. Then she stood at the counter where the good cups are and told me she had something she wanted to say, and I told her to go on. What she said was that I could have stopped it in June with 1 sentence. Bree, I know, that she'd have put every dollar back inside a week and nobody would ever have heard about it, and Wyatt would have a mother living in the same house as him. I said, "That's true." She said, "So don't pretend this was about the money." I let that sit, because it deserved to, and because she isn't entirely wrong, and I've never pretended otherwise at 4 in the morning. Then I asked her the only thing I actually wanted to know. I said, "When you were at this table with Randy Pilcher and Dale had his pen out, Pilcher asked who the third signature was. Whose name did you give him?" She didn't answer, and she didn't have to, because Pilcher's statement runs 4 pages and she has never read it, and I've read it about 30 times. She gave him mine. She told him I'd stepped out and would sign when I got back. She asked me what that mattered now. I said, "It doesn't. I've wanted to know for 11 months, and now I know. And it turns out it doesn't matter at all." She picked up the bags. At the door she said, "He'll come round," meaning Dale. She said it the way you say a thing you've decided to believe. I didn't tell her about the corridor, or the window, or what her husband had asked me about their son. That belonged to him. I said, "Drive safe." She didn't say anything back. I stood in the doorway until the car was past the Kastner's place. The same as in October, and that's the last time she was in this house. He signs whatever you put in front of him, he always has, and it's about the only thing he's ever been reliably good at. I've had a year with that sentence now. Here's what I'd say back, if you ever got to say things back. I read every document I ever signed, every one. My whole working life was reading the thing in front of me slowly, while somebody across the desk got impatient. The reason Milo's daughter never got 11 years out of him is that I sat at a kitchen table and read 18 months of statements nobody had asked me to read. And I never signed hers. That's the whole point. I never signed anything. She didn't need me to. That's the thing she understood and I hadn't, and it took 69 years and 4 pages in a brown envelope to teach me. They don't need you to sign. They need one person with a stamp who'll say you did. In March, I fixed the accordion. It had been in its case under my bed since the reading of the will. One fold of the bellows split at the last dance Milo ever played, and he taped it and finished the night and never did another thing about it. And that tape was still on there, gone hard as a shell. I did it with bookbinding cloth and hide glue at the kitchen table, badly, over 3 evenings. It works, it holds air, it plays. You could carry it into a hall tomorrow. That fold is stiffer than the other 29, and always will be, and on the push it gives about a quarter second late, so every chord going that way has a hitch in it that nobody in a room would ever name. Wyatt asked me last month whose it was. I told him it belonged to a man who was my friend for 57 years, and that we didn't speak for the last 9 of them, and that it was nobody's fault worth explaining to an 8-year-old. He asked if I'd teach him. So, that's Thursdays now. Him on the buttons, me working the bellows, the fan going. He's better at 8 than I was at 40, and he doesn't hear the hitch. I've watched for it. He doesn't hear it at all. One day he'll have this thing. He'll take it out of a case in a house I'm not in, and there'll be a gray patch on the 4th fold where somebody mended it badly at a kitchen table, and he'll know exactly who did that and roughly when. So that's what happened in my house. I took it back, every last dollar, out of her hands and into mine. The man who stamped it paid for it with the only thing he had that was worth anything, and she is going to be ticking a box on a form about it when she is 60 years old. Here's the part of it that belongs to you. Nobody has to steal anything to take everything you own. They need one stamp. One person who's paid, to be honest, swearing you stood in a room you were nowhere near. And that person keeps a book. In most places, it's the law. The book isn't theirs, and you can ask to see the page. So do that this week. If anybody has ever signed something on your behalf, a form at a bank, a paper at a closing, something a relative brought round and called routine, find out who stamped it and ask for the page for that day. It costs nothing. It takes a morning. And if the page is gone, you already have your answer, because nobody in the history of the world Ever cut a page out of a book for an innocent reason? If this one stayed with you, please like the video and subscribe to True Deceit Stories. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from tonight. There'll be another next week.